You know, Satan, the enemy of Christians, is crafty. And I want to bring up this story one more time because I want to go through some of the things that he does to take down Christians. All right? And I'm reading again from Genesis. I've read the story before, but I'm going to tell it again. Now the serpent was the craftiest of all the creatures that the Lord God had made in the field. And he came to the woman and he said to her, "Has God really said you cannot eat from any of the trees in the garden?" Well, the woman said, "Of course, we can eat from any of the trees in the garden, except that one in the middle. God said we can't eat from that one, or we can't even touch it. If we do, we'll surely die." And the serpent said, "You shall not surely die. For God knows that in the day that you eat of that tree, you will be like God, knowing both good and evil." And so the woman walked up to the tree, and she saw that the tree was good. The fruit of the tree was good for food, and it was beautiful to look upon and desirous to make one wise. So she took the fruit, she ate some, she gave it to her husband who was with her, and he ate some. Well, that's all I'm going to tell in this story, because I want to go through some of the things that the enemy of Christians does to try and take us down. All right? Thing number one, Satan goes to the most gullible one. And I'm not just saying this because she's a woman. I'm saying this because we have evidence in the story that she knows less than Adam knows about this tree. Do you know what that evidence is? To me, it suggests this when she calls the tree simply a tree. In fact, she calls it that tree in the middle. You know, that tree hadn't had a name. And we know that Adam knew the name of that tree. However, we don't know that Eve knew the name of that tree. And I would suggest to you that in your life, the least educated people are the ones that he will prey upon. And if we do not educate our kids on spiritual matters, then Satan will, and his education will look a little bit different. The second thing, Eve had a bit of a lack of clarity about what it is that God said. You know, God said, "You must not eat from the tree." However, the only way she could have got any information was through who? That's right. It was through Adam. But Adam must have told her something, because she knew a little bit. But Adam did not tell her correctly. And so, we find in this story the importance of telling. When God tells us something, we must tell it correctly, and we must tell it in full. And we mustn't add our own things. Now, Adam probably told her not to touch the tree. However, she thought that God said not to touch the tree. Adam wasn't clear. He didn't make himself clear when he taught Eve. And so what I would suggest is that we have to be clear about what we have to say and what God is actually saying. The devil is very willing to prey on these things where we are a little bit off. Another thing is that Satan started with a non-threatening topic. And Satan, I would suggest, does this all the time. You know, Adam probably told her not even to talk about the tree. And I'm guessing that because Satan asked her about all the other trees. You know? Satan knows by talking about the actual thing, he's going to turn her off. Because she's already been told something. However, by starting off about all the other trees, he gets her onto the topic. Satan is very cunning. Well, he'll do this in your life and he'll do this in your kid's life. He'll say, "Go ahead, check out this movie. It's not that bad. Check out this book. It's great. Isn't it great that our kids are actually reading?" But what is it that our kids are reading? It's not that big a deal, really. However, by getting them to read, it will lead them to things which might be a big deal. Another thing that the devil does, he makes God look strict. He says, "Has God really said you can't eat from any of these trees?" You know, he wants to make God look like the ultimate killjoy. You know? Is this true? No! No. God wanted them to have nourishment. God wanted them to have good fruit. God wanted them to have relationship. God wanted them to have relationship with each other. God saw the things they needed. He provided. God does everything well. He gives us everything we need to have the best life possible. And yet Satan got a foothold by making Eve think about the things that she wasn't allowed to have. Has God done this to you? That's the question I would ask. You know? Celebrate the things that God gives you that are good. Cultivate an attitude of thankfulness. Don't let one thing go by where you're not just thrilled, so that when things come up that you can't have, it's not that big a deal because your mind is dwelling on the things that you can have. That's my advice. Take it or leave it. You know, Satan goes on with an outright lie. However, Satan's lies are crafty lies because they look like truth. And what I mean by this is that, there are two kinds of death. There's this one kind of death which is the obvious death, becoming dust, and then there's that other kind of death that God said when He said, "On that day that you eat it, you will die." Well, we know that's not the obvious death of becoming dust, and so we know that there are two kinds of death. So Satan can actually truthfully say you will not die, this kind of death, the obvious death, on the first day. So this is the kind of thing where we have to know what it is God has said. Otherwise, we won't even recognize the lies because sometimes they aren't even lies. Sometimes they're truth or half-truths or false truth. So take that for what it is. How many of those truths can you recognize in your life? And another thing that Satan does is he paints God as this secret God, having all this secret information that he's trying to withhold from you. Because Satan tells the woman, God knows that in the day that you eat of this, then you will know all these things, both good and evil. And Satan does this in several ways. One of the ways that Satan does is to try and make us feel immature. To make us feel like, you could just grow up. You could just be a little bit older and a little bit more mature, and not in the way that God would like you to be more mature, by growing into truth, but you could just shortcut it, You could be like God by knowing both good and evil. And there's a sense in all of us, even in the most perfect of world, in which we feel somehow that knowing evil will make us a little bit more of an adult. Satan uses this all the time to drag us into things that are unhealthy for us and for our relationships. And another thing is that anything secret tends to be a feature of the occult or Satanism. So be on your guard against anything where it looks like God has given you some kind of secret information that other Christians cannot have. This is Satan's trick. Another thing is that Satan only had to bring Eve to the precipice. Eve jumped into this herself. She walked up to the tree herself. The tree sold itself. Sin and evil sell themselves. They look good. Satan doesn't really have to do anything. They sell themselves. And so, be aware of this. And another thing I would tell you, this is thing 7, is that God told Adam not to eat the fruit, but did He really tell him he couldn't touch the fruit? Did God tell Adam he couldn't pick the fruit? In fact, did God tell Adam he couldn't even cut the tree down? And this is what I'd like you to think about. Because how many things are in your life that you could eliminate? What if Adam had picked all the fruit and dumped it into the sea? Would there even be a temptation anymore? Would he have disobeyed God? No! God did not say you couldn't touch the fruit. He only said that you couldn't eat the fruit. Adam could have protected his wife and the people he loved by removing that thing of temptation. Is it not true? And what is it in your life and your house that you could remove that would protect the people that you love most from temptation? Well, these have been serious thoughts and valuable thoughts to protect ourselves and the ones we love from the cunning craftiness of Satan.